Hi, I'm Fatima Rodriguez Al-Makhim, and this is my presentation on historical events of special education in the United States. My first event is Brown versus Board of Education. That happened in 1954. Now, this was a case that was held against the Topeka Board of Education. In this case, the courts ruled that separate schools for colored children was unconstitutional. Now, that overturned Plessy versus Ferguson, where they held that separate was equal. Here in Brown versus Board, separate is not equal. Now, this case, in my opinion, is super significant for education in general, not just special education, but education in general, because without Brown versus Board, we wouldn't see or have seen all the changes that we see today. Special education and general education wouldn't be where they are today without Brown versus Board. We would still be separate. We would still see a lot of systemic racism. Not that it doesn't exist now, but it would be worse than what it is today without the findings in Brown versus Board. So I think that Brown versus Board is very significant, very important, and really paved the way for the changes that we see coming up, that we've seen happen with education and special education. My second event that I have on here is Diana versus Board of Education. This is 1970. Now, this is a class action lawsuit filed on the behalf of 9 Mexican American students. And this case was filed against the Soledad School District, the California State Board, and Superintendent Riles. The major argument in this case was using IQ tests for students that were having academic disabilities. But the big deal here was using tests that were written and administered in English to children that had native languages other than English, because they were being mislabeled as EMR, which is educable mental retardation. You know, just because a student doesn't understand doesn't mean that they're not smart or that they have a learning disability. So in this case, the court ordered that students be retested in the native language, and also that the state have a plan for re-entry for these students. If they were to go back into general education, they needed to have a plan for getting them there. I think that this case is really significant because it really, you know, besides Brown, the Brown versus Board, the initial talks of race, this again is bringing race to light and you know, paving the way for changes to be made. You know, it's not going to happen overnight, but change is going to happen in small steps. So this was definitely another significant step in the changes that we see in education and special education today. My third event that I have on here is Education for All Handicapped Children, 1975. This was a law signed by President Gerald Ford, and this law required public schools to provide access to education to students with disabilities. Also, they had to provide a free meal, one free meal. This law allowed the federal government to put some specific management requirements on special education, especially because they were giving federal funding for the food and for different things like that. So this is really important and significant in terms of students and all persons with disability getting equal rights, I lost what I was going to say. It allows, you know, the government to put some kind of requirements and make sure that that states and schools are doing what they need to do to make sure that all children have their equal education. So my next event is Larry P. versus Riles. Again, this is another lawsuit filed against the San Francisco Board of Education, the California Board of Education, and Superintendent Riles that we saw in the Diana case previously was also in this case as well. Now, this one was filed in 1977, but it didn't actually, their outcome didn't actually come until 1979. Again, this is talking about the IQ testing and using that to do placement and mislabeling students as EMR, again, educable mental retardation. It contested the validity of that testing. In particular, Larry P. is an African American student that was tested, and in the EMR classes, they didn't necessarily teach. There wasn't a lot of teaching going on. There was a lot of skills teaching. So the students weren't actually given the education that they deserved. In 1979, the court ruled that the IQ tests are discriminatory and resulted in unnecessary EMR placement. And again, it's just like the Diana case. We're talking about race again somewhat. This case talks about a African American student, and Diana case talks about Mexican American students. But again, race issue, another example of systemic racism in my point of view, but very significant because assessment should be unbiased and towards race. Assessment shouldn't have to do anything with race. So this is another stepping stone in that long journey of equal education for all. My next event is the American with Disabilities Act of 1990. This was enacted by President George Bush. It ensured the equal treatment of all people with disabilities in all places. I added this on here because it really is specific towards special education, even though it doesn't really talk about like education requirements or how, things are done as per the education system. I think that it's important because it talks about, the accommodations that need to be made for people with disabilities in public places in regards to transportation. And so it's very significant even for schools. Now, this act was amended in 2016, and Congress made changes to redefine the meaning of disability, which is very significant in terms of how we talk about disability today, how, the regard that we have and how important it is to make sure that persons with disabilities get equal treatment. Very, very important. And along with that goes the Individuals with Disability Education Act. This is part of the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. This one, provides a free appropriate education based on the needs of the child. There's 6 pillars to it, and they really outline how children, how that the education process is going to be handled out for children with disabilities. And so one is the IEP, the Individualized Education Program. This is a plan of study for the student, tailored to their needs. The second is FAPE, or the Free Appropriate Public Education. It's defined as special education services provided at a public expense, so free. Third on my list is LRE, the Least Restrictive Environment, and this really pushes for special education students to be in general education rooms as much as possible, just depending on their needs. Again, tailored to the needs of the student. The fourth on my list is appropriate evaluation. All students that may have a disability need to have an appropriate evaluation so that they can get the services that they need, and that is also to prevent from misidentifications of certain students. They don't want to label somebody something that they're not and give them services that they don't need. It just really all depends on the individual situation. Also, parent and teacher participation. That is really key in the success of the child. Parents and teachers have to have a bond, a connection, and a willing to strive for the child if we want the child to succeed. It's not going to work without that relationship between the teacher and the child. And then finally, due process. Due process just protects the rights of everyone involved, especially the child. Making sure that they're getting the services that they need when they need them, as they're supposed to, and not missing anything or letting anything slip through the cracks is very important. Probably, I would say that this is the most important event in history of special education. Excuse me, just because this law, with all others that had come before it, really made special education what it is today. I really think that we've come a long way into where special education is right now, and even though we probably have a lot of work left to do, but right now, as a mother of a daughter that has an IEP, I am very grateful for the services that she receives, and I wouldn't know what to do without this kind of service, because I myself wouldn't know what to do. And so having a partnership with the educators that she interacts with every day is very important, and it's very helpful, and I am very grateful. They give me such great ideas to help her succeed and to do better, that without those services, I'd be lost as a parent. So I am very appreciative and very thankful that lawmakers and, other people that have, these are very unfortunate events had to happen for all the changes to happen. So, it's very unfortunate that those things happen, but I'm very grateful that they happened as well, because if not, many children and many people in general would not be getting the services that they deserve and the help that they need to be successful citizens and live prosperous lives. So thank you. I enjoyed making this video and enjoyed learning so much. Bye. I forgot to add, here are my resources. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm very glad to talk to anyone. Now I'm really done. Thanks.